Yes, I'm recording now.
All right, thanks. That will save a file to your local computer after you leave the meeting. So if you stay on for Frank White's session, it won't, it'll generate the recording when you're done. And then Mark will be in touch. He'll share a Google Drive link, then you can upload it to him.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Okay. I'm going to go back and check on the other rooms, and hopefully I'll jump back in here. Are you in Central Florida?
I'm in
University
Eastern.
of Central Florida?
No, I'm actually at Columbia University, but I do research at University of Central Florida, which is why I put up their logo. Yeah.
You know Rob Furl and the plant scientist?
No, I don't.
Oh yeah, he's University of Central Florida. He's flown plant experiments on suborbital flights with Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, I think.
Wow, that's really cool. The only person or faculty member I know at UCF is Dr. Raghavan, Dr. Sita Raghavan. She has her lab. She does a lot of wind turbine research.
Huh, interesting. Well, have a great talk, and I'll hope to be back.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers.
We'll probably give it like one more minute before we get started, but it's wonderful to meet everyone. I'll start around 2 more minutes. And feel free, if you'd like to turn on your camera or maybe in the chat, introduce yourself. I would love to. This is a very interactive session. I don't want to talk at you guys. I really want to answer your questions and make this the most beneficial session for everyone. So maybe you could introduce yourselves. Feel free to turn on the mic or put it in the chat. I would love to just get to know who you are. Okay, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started now that it's 4:45, at least my time. I'm not sure what time zone everybody else is at. So hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthi, and I am a freshman at Columbia University in the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences, aspiring to be an aerospace physician, medical researcher, and astronaut. I'm also the founder and CEO of a nonprofit organization called Ignited Thinkers, which I founded in the 8th grade to spread space education to all students. And today I'm here really just to help you guys kind of navigate how you jumpstart your career in the aerospace sector. It was just a few years ago, I was in high school and I was trying to navigate, how do I get into the real industry? How do I, get my foot in the door and work with real professionals in the industry, learn about what it's like to do real research in the academia field. And I really want to get myself involved in, real world work apart from school. And it was a very difficult process for me to navigate. And I hope to be able to help all of you today by providing some insight, answering your questions, and hopefully just sharing a little bit more about the work I do in space medicine, if that's something that intrigues you. So this is a very hands-on, interactive session. So nothing planned for you guys. I'm not going to be reading slides at you. It's very just to get to know you. So I do see that in the chat, some of you have introduced yourself. It's really nice to meet you, Elizabeth and Kiara. I hope I'm pronouncing your names right. So Elizabeth is interested in getting teams management, space industry. Wow, that's amazing. That's a lot to do with Ignited Thinkers as well. So maybe we can talk about it afterwards, Elizabeth. Oh, that's awesome. You're an undergraduate psychology student who's interested in space. This is I think the perfect conversation then. So to provide, I'm going to maybe even stop sharing. I mean, I can start off with who am I? So I am a normal first generation immigrant from India to the US. Both of my parents were from India. I was raised my whole life basically in Virginia and DC. And I recently moved to New York for college. And I am in the engineering school, as I mentioned, studying biomedical engineering, and I'm interested in space medicine. So for those who may not know, space medicine is basically where it's a type of study, very, very niche, where I'm trying to understand the human body in space. What happens to, humans in space? How do their bones react? How does their cardiovascular system react? What happens to their spine? What happens to the fluids in their bodies? Anything changing? How can we take care of astronauts when they're in space, when they're so far away from medical help? And what can we learn from that to bring down back to Earth in order to improve medical health care here on Earth? So that intersection between space medicine is what I'm particularly very passionate about. And I've been able to do research at many incredible institutions, such as Columbia Medical Center, which I recently got involved in. I do ataxia and tremor research. I also am involved with University of Central Florida, where I did some wind turbine research. I worked with Baylor College of Medicine, Space Medicine Center. I was a former NASA Ames Research Center intern. So I worked with NASA for 4 weeks and just had the opportunity before I even got to college to immerse myself in so many incredible research experiences. And I hope to be able to kind of navigate what that process looked like for me and how you guys can get involved. But I wanted to first start off by saying that when I was younger, I did not think I could be in a space career. And the fact that all of you are taking initiative to be here today itself is incredible. A middle school rocketry club is what really sparked my passion in space. I joined the middle school club and I absolutely fell in love with rocketry and constructing rockets after school, that I took the passion and I applied for a 4-week NASA program in 7th grade called the NASA Sisters Program. It was just a small summer camp for young girls who are interested in space. And after getting accepted into that program and spending a few weeks at NASA, I absolutely fell in love with the environment and I knew that this would be my future. And so coming into high school, I didn't want to pick between my love for biology and my love for space. So instead, I did what anybody would do and I combined them together and discovered my passion for space medicine. But once I discovered that this is really what I want to do, I didn't know what to do from there. I was just a 10th grader. In perspective, for those who don't know what 10th grade is, I was about maybe, I want to say 14, 15 years old when I discovered my passion. And I was like, what do I do from here? I have this interest, but how can I really do something with it? And so I started creating social media accounts. I started reaching out to different professionals on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, trying to figure out, how can I get my foot in the door? How can I reach out to professionals in the industry and get some real world research experiences? And so once I did all of those cold emails, I think I emailed over, I want to say 50 to 60 professors who I thought his research was very interesting in 10th and 11th grade, and started just networking and reaching out to individuals to see if could be an opportunity for me to do some real hands-on research. And most of the knowledge that I have today regarding space biology comes from being able to do this research. I didn't learn space biology in high school. They didn't have a class called space biology. I just had to figure it out. And the best way to do that was getting involved in research. So that's a little bit of a background, but I also mentioned at the beginning that I founded a nonprofit organization called Ignited Thinkers. So Ignited Thinkers was, as I mentioned, both of my parents are immigrants from India. And so for me, when they first saw my first rocket launch go up, they were very excited and they said something that changed my life. My dad said, Gitika, you're so lucky to have the opportunity to build and fly rockets at the age of 13. I'm 40 and I never had the opportunity to build rockets, and I'm seeing my first launch because of my daughter. So you're so lucky to have this opportunity. Many kids in the world don't have this club. And then it all was just kind of hidden when my dad said that. And I was like, you're right. Without this rocketry club, my passion for space really would have never gone to the next level. I would have never believed that I could go into the space industry. And so at that moment, I founded Ignited Thinkers and have been working to outreach to various young students across the world through workshops, webinars. We have a YouTube channel where we highlight diverse space champions and their journeys. And we're hosting global contests around the world and really just trying to reach out to a very large audience. But that doesn't have anything to do with really my background and the research and why I'm here today. So I want this to be a session where I can answer all of your questions. So I can take this session in 2 ways. I want to get your Oh, thank you, Dr. Wagner. I wanted to get your opinion because I want this session to be very interactive. I have two things planned. Either I could go into more of a Q&A type session where I can answer the questions that you guys think is valuable for you, questions you may have about your own journey or advice I have, particularly in your situation. So we could go the Q&A route, or I could dive into some of the aerospace medicine research that I was a part of at NASA and kind of give you an insight into what some real world research looks like. So which way do you guys prefer? Do you prefer kind of Q&A or more of me presenting some of the research that I've done?
Well, we probably have time for both. I don't know if I speak for everybody who's off camera, but hearing about your research would be great.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so maybe okay, I can see that people would like a bit of both. So maybe I could briefly go into some aerospace medicine research. I'm not going to go too deep and then leave some time for questions. So, okay, so to give you perspective, 2 summers ago, I applied for a NASA internship called NASA Gene Lab. And I found this opportunity really just going through Twitter and realizing that I was eligible because of my age and my interest in space biology. So I applied and I got into the program and got to spend 4 weeks virtually because of the pandemic during this internship. And so during this internship, I learned a little bit about gene expression and data analysis. So what we did, I think I should probably give you guys, I kind of talked about the importance of space medicine. So go into my research. So NASA gave us, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but let's start from here. So NASA collects lots of data every year, and they store all of this data, all the experiments they conduct on the ISS on this virtual open access repository called Gene Lab and on Galaxy. And so if you search up Gene Lab Galaxy, you will have access to all of these data sets that are just there for scientists and young researchers like you to just analyze and use RNA sequencing to discover something with these data sets. So during my internship, a group of 3 students, me and 2 others, were assigned to explore a data set that was collected on Drosophila. Drosophila are very tiny fruit flies and bugs. And you might be wondering to yourself, why did they send fruit flies to space? What does that have to do with anything? Well, NASA sent these fruit flies to space to understand some cardiovascular functionality in space. So fruit flies, as well as humans, actually share 75% of the same cardiovascular disease-related genes. And so by being able to study these fruit flies in space, we can potentially discover a lot about humans' cardiovascular system and how it might potentially behave in space. And so what NASA did is they sent 30 fruit flies to space and they tested 30 on the ground. And they basically had 2 data sets, one which was in flight, one that was on ground control. And our job as the interns was to discover what were the differences in their gene expression in space compared to ground control, and what does that potentially tell us about humans. So that was a lot at once, which I'll break down slowly throughout this presentation, but that's kind of the overview. So to go back a little bit, fruit flies are a really great organism to study with, just as mice or rats would be in scientific research. And the reason Drosophila is a good organism is because it's very small, it's easy to handle, especially in a place like the ISS. It's very small. It has well-defined and conserved genes, which basically means that over generations, we can understand, like fruit flies have a very short lifespan, so we can also do generational studies of what would happen if fruit flies were born in space and what would happen to their offspring. We can just kind of, they have conserved genes over their offsprings, and they have very short lifespans, so we can easily understand what happens to their babies within a few years. So it's a very easy organism to work with. So when we had this data set, what we did is we used NASA's tool, Galaxy, and we did some data analysis using RNA sequencing, which is a very complicated tool to basically figure out which genes were abnormally upregulated and abnormally downregulated. And when we used, kind of went through the steps, and I learned what that process looked like, and we created a volcano plot. And what this volcano plot shows us is many genes that were abnormally behaving in space in these tiny fruit flies. We found about, one, two, you can see all these blue genes, all these numbers and letters indicate a gene. We can see that all the ones in blue are the ones that were downregulated in space, and all the ones in red were upregulated, which means all these genes were somehow abnormally behaving in space by either being overexpressed or underexpressed. And if something is not working like it does on Earth, there might be some repercussions in the cardiovascular system. So what my team did is we went through each and every gene, and we used this platform called Flybase. What Flybase is a platform where we could take all these genes and figure out what it does in a fruit fly. So we put all these genes into Flybase. We tried to figure out what are the roles of each of these genes in the fruit fly. What does it mean anything? And unfortunately, we couldn't find the functionalities for many of these genes. We didn't know what role it even played in a fruit fly. We just know that it was being abnormally behaved. But we did find two genes, which we circled and boxed in red, that are actin genes in the fruit flies. And these two had identified functions. We found that these actin genes in the fruit flies are related to cardiovascular contractility. So it had something to do with heart contractions and the way the heart was beating in the fruit fly. So we assumed that this could potentially mean something in humans. So once we found these two genes, we were like, okay, there's something going on with contractility in fruit flies in space. Some behavior was changing. So we found these genes of interest and we found their roles. And then we tried to see, okay, in the fruit fly, do these two genes of interest have some sort of relationship? And we found there was a scientific paper on PubMed that we found in this research process that said that these two genes are actually compensate each other on Earth, which means that when one of these actin genes is upregulated, the other is downregulated. And they compensate for each other when one is over or under each other. But in space, we noticed that both of these were downregulated and they both were not compensating for each other. So we were like, okay, they're not compensating in space, so something must be wrong with the fruit flies that we don't know of. So do humans have this same exact behavior? So what we did is, after discovering this, we tried to find the human ortholog gene, which is basically a fancy way of saying, do these fruit fly genes, these actin genes we found, exist in humans? And we did a little bit, we used Flybase, we used different platforms that already exist to input these fruit fly genes. And we found that there was one human gene called the ACTG1 that is the main human paralog to these actin genes. And so we were like, okay, so maybe ACTG1 in humans is behaving differently in space because it's behaving differently in fruit flies. So this could potentially mean something. Of course, we were very far-fetched. There are no cardiovascular diseases that we know of that astronauts get in space. But we did discover that there was this small difference in fruit flies, which potentially could mean something in humans. So we kind of were far-fetched with this statement, but we developed kind of an experiment that NASA could potentially do or fund in order to understand this knowledge gap. Most times in research, the main purpose of every experiment is just to see if there's some sort of knowledge gap. And if there is it worth investing money to kind of fill that gap and do an experiment using tools like, like a microgravity simulator, using like a centrifuge or something on Earth to figure out if there's a discrepancy that we should be careful about to help protect astronaut health. So I see some things in the chat. Oh, biology's never been more interesting. Yeah, I know. When you learn about biology in school, it's very standard. It's kind of the same. But when you put the element of taking out gravity and putting in microgravity, it's very interesting to see how really humans behave in space. So a lot of mysterious components. So that's what I really like about space medicine. So basically, my team and I developed an experiment to potentially fill this knowledge gap that we found. And our hypothesis was, from all that I've told you, is that microgravity downregulates the key actin genes, ACT88F and ACT79B, leading to reduced cardiac contractility and impaired cardiac function. And this was just using some papers that we read, some background research we did, and kind of taking the information that we already knew about what actin genes do. And so we kind of went through the different aims, what our expectations were. I'm not going to go through all this because I'm just going to be repeating myself. But we wanted to basically test the relationship between what these two genes did and potentially get a human tissue, a tissue of a human to test this as well. So we kind of just pitched this to a few scientists at NASA at the end of my internship, got their feedback on what they think of our data analysis. And I think the purpose of the internship, more than discovering something for real, it was to go through the process of what a real scientist would go through, which is hours of research, hours of reading, and hours of data analysis with sometimes no results, which is okay. Through this process, through this internship, I kind of learned the process of what it means to do gene expression, what it's like to take this information we learned, use existing resources to come up with an experiment or hypothesis to fill a knowledge gap. So that's kind of overall what my research was on in aerospace medicine, and I can go into certain details if you would like, but that's kind of a glimpse into some space biology genomics research. And I see that Elizabeth has her hand up, so I'd love to take your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is really interesting, and I'm really glad you had a chance to do it. I was wondering, I'm actually kind of a loner when it comes to working on projects. I like to figure things out on my own a lot. And I did recently work on a project with somebody, and it like blew up. Okay, the dynamics of the people. So how did you have like a totally collaborative, loving relationship with everybody in this group, or did you have conflict, and how did you work with it? I really need to learn from you. Okay.
Yes, I'll turn off. I'll stop sharing so I can actually talk to everyone. But that's a great question. I am also a type A person, so I get it. I like to be organized and have things a certain way. So I can totally relate with you on that. But I actually didn't have any arguments or any problems during this, maybe because it was a virtual internship, so it's like a different dynamic. But coming into this internship, it was just the three of us handling this very big project. So we were able to, we were all new. We never did RNA sequencing. It was a very new process for us. So we all tried to talk through every step to figure out what we needed to do. And of course, at times it got overwhelming because we had so much to do in such a crunch period of time. And we would tell, okay, Rachel, you can do this, and Rommel, you can do this, and I will do this. And we split tasks where we felt the most confident with and came back a few hours later to kind of digest what we just did and what we did individually. So I think I don't have an answer because every person is different and every group dynamic is different. But I would say that, sometimes talking through every step together can be overwhelming. So thinking of splitting tasks and then coming back and reconvening to talk about what you discovered could be a good strategy. And maybe just having a clear communication is sometimes critical. I everyone's different. Every group is different. I think I got very lucky with my teammates as well. So I think my best advice for you would be to figure out if you could split tasks and come back together, or potentially go step by step and kind of tackle each question. Hopefully that answered your question.
I still have a lot to learn.
I think it'll click when you find the right team.
Yeah, I think that was it. Thank you.
Yep, of course. Anybody else have any questions for me?
I want to be sure to give everybody else a chance and jump right in there, but I've got perhaps an interesting question I can throw out there if that would be good.
Yeah, of course. I think Elizabeth has one more, but we could do yours first as well.
Oh yeah, if you're raising your hand, Elizabeth.
No, Mark, you go ahead. I can go afterward.
Well, Gitika mentioned her interview series before, and she came in, by the way, and guest hosted one of the Space Prize guest speakers series, which was fantastic. But I'm curious, sort of backing up a step to the title of your session and the focus of your session, what have you learned from talking with such a wide variety of professionals in the space industry? Like, is there some synthesized takeaway, or like top 3 takeaways that you might might pass on to others?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So for those who don't know, again, to just reiterate, I have a YouTube channel where I highlight diverse stories and how various professionals got into the aerospace sector. And every interview is around 30, 40 minutes. And I just kind of dive into their story. And it was just every single interview I've done, probably over 135 at this point, and they all are incredibly inspiring, like every single one of them. They come from such unique backgrounds, and I always ask the same questions generally at the end specifically. And the question is, what is one piece of advice you wish you knew when you were a younger student or a younger professional before really diving into this industry? And I've noticed a very common answer, and it's almost the same for everyone in different words, I'd like to say. And I'll say like the top 2 or 3 answers. The first one is like never give up, which is so like cliche and everybody says it, but some of these individuals that I've interviewed, one person was actually a drug addict and came out of being a drug addict and now works at one of the best positions at NASA. He talked about how he overcame his drug addiction and now has his own astrobiology show at NASA, and how that journey looks like for him. There was another lady who had to work. Her parents were in prison when she was younger, at 13, and she had to basically work like a part-time job while being a university student and babysitting her younger sibling while her parents were kind of going back and forth from prison. And it was just hearing, and now she has her own startup and she works on investing in space companies and she's very successful. And there have been stories, those are kind of the 2 that just first come into my mind, but everybody has had many obstacles. And when you look at their LinkedIn profile or their resume, you're like, they've had an easy life. Everything was successful for them. But really, when you hear their tough backgrounds and all that they did to get there, it's really the mantra of like, never give up and always take your shot is something that I learned, because I might think, oh, I failed this test. It's the biggest problem in the world now. I'm not going to go anywhere in life. But then I hear all of this and I'm like, wow, they had it even rougher, but they came out stronger. So I think the biggest, thing that I take away from every conversation is don't judge someone by their accomplishments, because their journey must have been just similar or even harder than yours. So take it as an inspiration to keep following your dreams and to never give up.
Yeah, I love that. It also occurs to me that your 100+ interviews is probably a better education than you're ever going to get in any school. And that's really fantastic that you're turning around and sharing that with everybody too. That's great.
Well, that's wonderful. I love what you just said. What is the name of your YouTube channel, or are they still up there? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's called Ignited Thinkers. I can put the link actually.
Okay.
Share it with you guys. Yeah, each story is just so unique, and I'm just in awe of every. I've interviewed some of my like greatest role models, and when I hear their stories, I'm just always in awe, because they're not what I thought. I mean, you look at them and they look like idols, but then you hear their story and it just humanizes them.
Well, I've recently contacted our local recreation department in my city. I live in the DC area as well.
Oh,
So yeah, and so one of the recreation department leaders for the teens is looking at new programs to provide for the teens that are not, necessarily sports related. And so that when they're hanging out in the teen room, they've got something maybe a little bit more focused to do, particularly since after coming out of COVID, a lot of people don't have a lot of focus. So we're thinking of putting on together some different programs to get them interested in it. I definitely want to let them know about your YouTube channel, but would you ever be interested in actually coming and talking to them on Zoom as well?
I would absolutely love to. That's exactly, we do a lot of webinars, and my parents live near DC. So if it's ever a time that I'm coming home and you happen to, like the students happen to be there, I'd love to even come in person and do something with them, because I would love to get them excited about space. Yeah.
Oh, that would be great. I live in Tacoma Park, which is right outside DC in the Maryland side. Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I live in, yep, I'm in the DMV area as well, Fairfax County.
Yeah, great. Thank you for making that offer.
Yeah, of course. And maybe I could put my email in the chat if you wanted to like reach out, if that's easier. And we can definitely arrange something.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much. And thanks, Mark, for bringing her on here.
Okay, I see a question in the chat. So I am currently an undergraduate psychology student, and I would love to know what would you recommend, what would your recommendation be for someone from the field of psychology who's interested in stepping into the space industry? I have considered conducting research, but I'm also very social, but would like to have a closer interaction with someone or a group of people who have been touched by being a professional. Okay, that's a really great question. I've actually struggled a lot with this question as well, because I'm a very social person. So for me, I love research, but I also need the portion where I get to be like the component of being a physician. And I don't know with what route in psychology you're looking at, but I know that NASA has some like a career option called a flight surgeon, and you on ground control would be able to take care of astronaut health and interact with astronauts and make sure they're psychologically doing well and they're taking care of their well-being. That's potentially a route you could look into. Another route that I personally was looking into was I still want to become a physician. So I want to go into that medical school route and go into my aerospace medicine residency afterwards, and kind of combine working in a clinic or like a hospital, but also working on astronaut health. So I don't have to dedicate my whole day to doing research or my whole day to working at a hospital, but I could kind of split that time between the both. So you don't have to necessarily just choose, I'm going to do PhD only. You could choose to be an MD/PhD or just MD and still do research. One of my role models is Dr. Shauna Pandya, and she's a neurosurgeon. And she told me she works at a hospital, but she also does research. So on the weekends, or she's part of the Possum Project, where she does a lot of really cool space-related research that you could consider doing as well from a psychology background. So I think just making sure you don't feel like you're in a box is important. And just realizing you could kind of combine the both and still work with astronauts, work with real humans, and not just be in a laboratory.
Think a little bit about that question. I think one of the challenges of going to Mars is the psychological part of it, and seeing Earth like go away and become a point, and your communications get delayed, and you can't have a conversation after a certain point, and you'd be in a spacecraft for 7 months with no fresh air, no fresh food, all that. I think there's great opportunities there.
Even for the short flights, Beth was just talking about, and I know you know her well, Ron. She was talking about the half-second training and all of the training that goes into the Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin astronauts preparing for the short experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've thought about that because I'm signed up with actually both, and how to make that transition from the thrill of having a rocket pushing you back in your seat, firing you at 2,500 miles an hour, to instantaneous weightlessness and a contemplative state where you can look out the window and just kind of let it all come into you as best you can. It's like two very different mind states.
Yeah, and that reminds me perfectly of like two individuals. One lady, her name is Dr. Mindy Howard, and she has her own startup where she works on maximizing the overview effect. And she has a psychology background as well. So again, the whole unconventional route of psychology, she works with astronauts or commercial astronauts to make sure they get the full experience of what an overview effect would look like. There's also, I've interviewed multiple analog astronauts, and one particular individual, Mr. Monier, he was telling me that on one of his analog missions, him and his crewmates were fighting over orange juice because it was the last one and someone had it and they were fighting, which sounds very silly to us because we're like, why would you argue over orange juice? You can always have something else. But when you're confined in a place with barely any food options and orange juice happens to be the most fruitful drink there is, and you've been there for a long time and someone stole it from you basically without telling you, it can get frustrating. So really just the idea of psychology and taking it the unconventional way, especially in space, because I feel like in space industry, we're not confined to one job or one career. There's just so many things you can intertwine with. So yeah, really just thinking out of the box.
Yeah, I have another question, please. Well, actually a comment. Especially because you're interested in space medicine. I actually participated in the FAA study to launch over 60-year-olds into space using the Virgin Galactic and the X-Core flight launches. And I'm just gonna say, maybe we can talk offline about it because
That would be great.
yeah, I have some concerns, and I'd just like to really talk about it with you since you talk to other people, et cetera. And anyway, there's a article about it in New Space magazine, but yeah, I got your email, so I'll follow up with you. Okay.
That would be great. Yes, I would love to. I'd love to talk to you about that.
Thank you.
I see a question in chat. I also see someone who raised their hand. Nadia, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, are you in WAM?
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Are you in WAM? Like WAM?
Oh, woman. Oh, yes, I am. Sorry, I was like, I said a
Yeah.
location you're talking about. Oh, yes, yes,
No.
I am. A woman. Yes, I am. I'm in actually the group chat, the WhatsApp group as well. Yes, I love
Yeah, me
Eleanor Frost.
too.
And
Oh, she's
yes,
amazing.
yes,
She's amazing.
yes.
So you're based in the US, right?
Yes, I'm currently in New York. Wait, I think I follow
Yeah.
you on LinkedIn. I think I reached out to you before. I think so.
Really? Oh no,
Yes,
that's amazing.
I think so.
I thought I
think
reached out
so.
to you.
Oh, it was one or the
That's
other. I remember talking with you. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool. No, I was just thinking like her name rings a bell. And then
Yes.
I was like, you just said aerospace medicine. I was like, maybe that's where. That's
Yeah.
so awesome. You know that, you should come to Scotland to visit Dr. Frost and me. We'll give you
Yeah,
a whole
given the
tour.
opportunity, I 100% would. I've never been anywhere in Europe, so one day it'll happen.
Yeah, you'd be really welcome in Scotland. That's brilliant. Well done on your talk as well. But I
Thank
just wanted
you.
to ask that, to be honest. But we'll talk later. But yeah, it's so nice to meet you over Zoom.
Yeah, it's wonderful to meet you as well. I'm sure we'll meet at a future conference for aerospace medicine.
Definitely. Definitely. Well done.
Thank you. I also see another question in the chat. It says, I'm a pre-med student aspiring to obtain an MD PhD in aerospace medicine and bioastronautics. Wow, that's awesome. I'll be taking a gap year in hopes to do research in the space field, but I'm struggling to find opportunities. What advice do you have for someone trying to get involved in research when not enrolled in the university that have these opportunities? That's a perfect question, I feel like, for me. So I got into most of my research experiences when I was in high school. So I was not in a university. So it's almost like very similar to your situation, I would say. I was also looking into MD PhD opportunities, so I can talk about that as well. But first, for the research opportunities, I think there are so many ways to get involved as a student, and it's very difficult, which I understand your position. I think the biggest thing that worked for me is I used LinkedIn and I did a lot of cold emailing. So if there's a particular lab or a professor who's doing work that you would be interested in potentially working in, or you see that in a particular university, which has your dream MD PhD program, you see a particular lab you're interested in, you should go reach out. You should send them an email introducing yourself and how you're really passionate about this certain topic. And if there's a way you could get involved as like a research intern or as a research student, just to get to know them. And even if it's just an introductory call, which becomes something, is also really, I think the key way of getting these opportunities. For example, when I did some wind turbine research, which was my first experience in 10th grade with Dr. Raghavan at University of Central Florida, I reached out to her on Twitter. I introduced myself and I said how I was really intrigued by some of the material sciences work she was doing in wind turbines. And we had an introductory call so I could get to know about it. And then I ended up kind of getting involved with it because she saw my interest and my passion for it and how I got really excited about the research. So I think something that students don't do is taking that first step to just sending that email, because more than likely you will get a response, even if it's a no, because they want to help students. So I think taking that effort to cold email can be very critical. Additionally, based on your location, if you're in the US, I know there's a lot of ways gap year students could get involved with paid internships. So looking into those companies, looking into NASA, Blue Origins. I mean, Blue Origin doesn't have a lot of bioeconomics, but I'm pretty sure SpaceX, Aerospace, a lot of there's another Sophic Synergies. It's a very cool company in Houston. One of my mentors is a part of it, and they do bioastronautics research. So I think just trying to find those startups or finding those organizations who are doing the work you're doing and just sending an email can go a really long way. And for an MD, PhD, I was also looking into these programs as well. And if there's any specific questions you have regarding that, I could potentially try to help as an undergrad student. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I think the biggest advice that I would give to every student is something that I've learned is, take 100% of the shots, because you're going to miss 100% of shots you don't take. It's a quote that a hockey player said, and it stuck with me ever since like I was a third grade, second grader, because I used to play basketball. And I say this in every talk that I go to because it's changed my life, which is don't tell yourself no, because you never know. Like, let someone else make that decision for you, because you might be underestimating your worth, your skills. And sometimes they're not even looking for the skill sets or your resume. They're looking for your energy. They're looking for what you bring to the table in terms of your passion. So instead of letting someone else say no for you, it's always important, if you see an opportunity that you're eligible for because you're above 18, or you're from a certain location, or you have a certain educational background, apply for it, because you would rather let someone else say no to you than you just pretending that they're going to say no and you don't apply. So every opportunity is worth it. And a lot of the coolest opportunities and speaking opportunities and conferences I got to attend were just because I asked and I wasn't afraid to just go out there and put myself out there. So that's the biggest advice I would give.
Gitika, it was sort of a throwaway line you said a few minutes ago, but I wonder if this might be a good prompt for sharing more with the other participants and anybody who watches on the recording. But you just said one of my mentors, and I think there's not a lot of 18-year-olds that have multiple mentors. I wonder if you could talk about how you've approached mentorship or how you benefited from it.
Yeah, that's a really key question. I think mentorship honestly helped me take my career really forward. So when I was around 14 or 15 years old, I opened my LinkedIn. I was against social media. I'm going to be honest. I thought social media was just a way to waste your time and not get work done. So I was like, as a middle schooler, I was like, I am not getting social media. I'm not going to be one of those people. And high school comes around and I was like, you know what? I need to create a LinkedIn account. I need to figure out what it's all about, because I heard LinkedIn's like the place for professionals. So for me, that was the first social, I think Twitter I had first. I didn't really find a lot of benefit from it at first. And so I ended up creating a LinkedIn account in 10th grade and put in my profile, talked about my interests, the work I was involved in, and I just started reaching out to people that I thought were cool. I would be like, I follow people from all over the space industry, the medical fields, biology, space communication, really just anyone who I thought would be interesting to potentially talk with. And I just started clicking that connect button until I think one point LinkedIn was like, you connect with too many people today. So really, I took advantage of every connection I could make on LinkedIn because it's free. And I didn't know anybody in the space industry before. Like both my parents are not in the space industry. So for me, this was the only way I had a chance of talking with someone in space. And so I would just connect and I would send an introductory message of how I'm an aspiring aerospace physician and I want to talk with them about their advice. And I think also with my initiatives with Ignited Thinkers, I had a really good way of just asking them to come talk with students and to give advice with the work that I'm doing, and potentially if they could collaborate with me. And so I had a really great way to outreach to different individuals and folks. And also just I had the confidence to go out and share my interests and to set up Zoom calls. And I would spend a lot of time just connecting with individuals. Many wouldn't respond, but there were a lot that did respond. We ended up arranging Zoom calls. We learned about each other's interests. I learned from their journey. They learned mine. They gave me advice. And we would just keep doing that every month, and it just became like this continuous thing. My closest mentors are like Mr. Courtney Stad. He worked in space policy, and he now has his own. He has a company called Capital Alliance, and so he does a lot of work with space policy and technology. I also, one of my other close mentors is Dr. Jennifer Fogarty, and Christina Corp, and all these individuals who I met off of LinkedIn, and I just followed up. I kept following up every time I had a question. I would ask them for advice, and I would try to do some things with them, and it just kind of became a relationship. I've never met some of these people in person. I've only met Christina in person. I haven't met Mr. Stad, who's in DC, or Dr. Fogarty in person. But it's just a virtual relationship that I was able to build over time, by setting up these Zoom calls, finding when they're available, and I can learn from their experiences. So I think, and they were the ones who provided me with many incredible connections, who kind of branched out my network. Like when I had my first call with Mr. Stad, he recognized my interest. He connected me with NASA's chief medical officer, who connected me with more people, who connected with more individuals. So it was just kind of like starting at a point, and it just kept branching from there. So I think the key to, and it helped me really just build a supportive community who helps me, and I'm continuing to grow that community every day. So it helps me in every aspect of my life. But I think the biggest advice I would give you is, again, it's like I'm repeating myself, but go reach out to individuals, and it'll take a lot of time. I would spent a lot of hours just reaching out to individuals who wouldn't respond to me, but there were a few folks who did, and for them it was just worth it. So I think just keep reaching out to individuals you think are cool, and they'll probably respond to you. Yeah, social media is a great place to network. I didn't realize the value, especially of LinkedIn. I was like scared as a student if I'd be taken seriously in that type of network, but you would be surprised. It's such a supportive community, and you'll find your people very quickly. You can engage with many people's posts. You can learn about new job opportunities, research opportunities. So social media really, if you take it in the positive light and you kind of follow the right people, it's definitely a great platform to build yourself. I heard another question. What advice would you give students on finding resources to educate themselves? Okay, that's a good question. It depends on what field you're interested in. I use resources like PubMed. It helped me a lot if you're interested in space. If you're interested in biology and medicine, or anything science related. I think a lot of research is on PubMed, so I use that a lot to get into reading papers. YouTube, I think it's overlooked for pleasure videos, but I think on YouTube you can find really, really great resources, 5-minute videos introducing you to complicated topics. For example, I'm not super into finance, but I've been trying to get myself more proactive on what's happening on the econ side and the stock side, and like what is blockchain. And I watched these really cool 5-minute videos that explain and break everything down. So I think taking advantage of YouTube is really a great resource. Yeah. Are there any tips or particular resources you would recommend for someone who wants to open up a social media account exclusively for professional services and maintain it up to date? Yeah, so with Ignited Thinkers, so I have my personal, where I have my own LinkedIn, my own Instagram and Twitter, but I also have my nonprofit social media for Ignited Thinkers. And what I do, it's kind of hard to balance it both. I would say it's very difficult to keep up both accounts, but especially I think on LinkedIn, you can create your own company page. So I think it's very easy to differentiate what's a personal account versus a business account. Instagram has the same option. You can make it a business account, which kind of differentiates that. I'm not sure if I don't think Twitter has anything like that yet, but I think for me, I would just make those business accounts and have like a plan. Are you going to post once a week, twice a week? What's your schedule going to look like, and stick with it? I think it's important to not just be like, oh, I'll post whenever I think of something. Have a schedule where you're going to be like, I'm going to post weekly, and make sure you interact with other individuals who relate to whatever your business is related to, your service is related to, because the more people you interact with, the more people who will learn about your business. So I think being active on social media and having a plan of how active you want to be is important. Oh yes, and Google Scholar. Yeah, I like Google Scholar as well. Mhm. Are there any other questions? I know we covered a lot of breadth of topics and advice, but oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I was able to help you out. And if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to, text me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or email me. I'm always very active on social media, as you can probably tell, and that's how I meet most everyone that I know. So really feel free to reach out to me whenever, and I would love to answer your questions. Okay, what was your favorite part about space industry be? Oh, yes, don't worry if you have to leave. Thank you for being here. And to answer your question, what would my favorite part about the space industry be? I think my most favorite part of the industry is how inclusive and accepting it is. I know the space industry is historically very, I think, not diverse in the individuals, but I'm starting to really see the doors opening up for so many individuals of all backgrounds, and everyone is starting to be accepted. And I personally have not yet faced any sort of like discrimination of any sort, but rather I've had open hands. I think space is one of those industries where everyone is so passionate about what they do that if you ask them a question about their job, their career, or their journey, they are excited to talk about it. So I think space is just one of those things where people are not forcing themselves to be a part of the industry. It's just they love it. It's innate, it's curiosity that drives them to where they are. And so when you ask them a question or you have, like, what's your advice? They're open to talking with you. So space has been one of those industries where everyone is so passionate to talk about what they do and they love what they're doing basically on a daily basis. And they're probably fulfilling their childhood dream of working at a space company. So they're very excited to talk about their job and their advice and their journey to where they are. So my favorite thing has been the people and how amazing, supportive they are of all your dreams, even though they may seem incredibly ambitious. They're very accepting of it, and they just embrace everyone with open arms, which is what I love about the industry.
Have you noticed in your conversations with your mentors or just your interviews that a lot of people had well, you mentioned a couple of people that had some really big challenges, but have you noticed that they have a circuitous path to get to where they are today, or is it really very straight line, or is it both,
Yeah. I feel like there have been one or two, no, I'm not gonna say one or two, maybe like 5 or 6 guests out of the 135 I've interviewed who've said very straightforward that they've come from a space background. Their family members were interested in space and they were fortunate and they knew that this is what they wanted to do their whole life. So they went through the military route, they became government officials, they worked and then they became NASA employees, and they just had their paths set out for them. I did have a few individuals who couldn't necessarily share obstacles that they had, which I'm sure doesn't reflect that they didn't have any obstacles, but they probably thought it wasn't worth mentioning compared to some of the other deeper challenges others and obstacles others go through. So I've had a few individuals say that space was just, they knew that this is their path and their goal in life, and that's all they did. But the majority of the individuals that I've interviewed did not, they have always loved space. They've detoured in some way and then come back to space. I think a lot of times I've even noticed a lot of students, they're so excited about space. I give webinars to kindergartners, first graders, all through elementary school, and they're so excited about being an astronaut. If I ask them who wants to go to space, many hands are up. If I talk about who wants to be in a space career, many hands go up. But as you get older, that career doesn't seem real or even feasible. And that was me. I was little, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to go find aliens and be friends with aliens. And that slowly just disappeared until I got to middle school, and that club kind of reignited that passion. I probably would have been on a completely different trajectory if it wasn't for that club. I somehow lost it was not losing my interest. It was more so I didn't think it was possible for me to become an astronaut for real. I thought it was a child's dream. And I think many people who I've interviewed thought the same. They said, this was something that I thought I could do when I was little. I lost it. And then I came back in the middle of my career and I was like, hey, let's go to space now because I can actually do this. So really, I think we need to figure out what's happening in between that makes a lot of kids think space is not a real feasible industry they can go into, kind of fix that problem and get students excited about space throughout their education. Because a lot of students or a lot of professionals I've talked with detoured and came back when they found the opportunity. So that's something that I've noticed, and I think it's something we need to fix.
Yeah, I think the detours are often necessary because you pick up all these other skill sets
That's
that are
true.
interdisciplinary, and they really help you. You didn't think they were. You think you're off track, but you're actually picking up things that you can use further on. But it's good to hear
That's
that you
true.
say that. But
That's
thank
true.
you.
And it's
I was just going to add that really resonates with me too, and I think like probably a lot of people in this community grew up wanting to go, be an astronaut and everything, and end up taking the circuitous route that Elizabeth is talking about. But I recently saw some interesting statistics around this. I don't 100%
really.
trust them, but the telescope company we were working with, Unistellar, they made some donations to the Space Prize. They commissioned a study of 2,500 American students. It was a research firm that does this sort of thing, but they said 94% of American students are interested in space. And
Wow.
the wild thing was nearly as high a number American teachers don't know how to engage them.
Yeah.
And that I think is part of why you see that divergence.
Yeah.
And you're lucky, like you talk about sort of getting reignited in middle school. A lot of research shows that's where kids decide science is not for me, and we lose a lot
Exactly.
of people who might have been interested in space.
Exactly. That's exactly why. I mean, for me, if it wasn't for that club, I was always intrigued with science. I was very lucky that I was into STEM, but a lot of students I know, they think math is too difficult or they can't be a part of space because space is all you have to be like Albert Einstein. And there's a lot of misconceptions that drive students away from space. And Elizabeth made a great point that I think it's where you discover your interdisciplinary love for other subjects as well. But the problem is also that many students never come back to space because they don't have the opportunity to kind of rekindle their love for space. So the people who really get back into space have a privilege of some sort of rediscovering the opportunities in space. A lot of individuals just end up going into the traditional path that they think is correct, but not necessarily something they love to do. So just trying to show, just giving an opportunity for everyone to just discover space again at an older age is really necessary.
Mark, what you just said about teachers not being able to engage the students or for whatever reason, it reminded me of my biology teacher who would just sit in the front of the room and read out to us things for us to write in our book, okay, as definitions, et cetera, et cetera. Very rote. But I remember one day I was sitting in the way back on the absolute diagonally opposite side of the room from her. And I took out an orange and I was peeling it because I was hungry and I was eating it under the table, right? And she looks up like she's way in the front of the room. She goes, "Who's eating the orange?" Right? And I thought, in retrospect, I thought that would have been a great teaching moment to explain how my orange in the back of the room, right? That she could smell it all the way in the front because of what's happening with the essence of orange in the air and blah 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 blah. And I can't explain it because she didn't explain it to me. But that's the kind of teaching moment I would have, I think I would have been helpful to, anyway, I'm just sharing. Maybe I would have had a different path if she talked about the orange.
Ironically, maybe you and I shared this before, but my 10th grade biology teacher bragged about using the same quizzes for 30 years. And I can't, as a science teacher, I can't imagine.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And it was the same thing. He would write stuff for us to copy down. That was our biology class. We can do better, right, Gitika?
100%. And I think teachers are starting to realize that, and there's been a lot of initiatives like Teachers in Space to really get more teachers involved. And I hope that with commercialization happening and space really starting to kind of come in the forefront of everyone's eyes, and people are starting to recognize that, oh wow, look at the space industry, they're doing things with a lot of money. We need to, it grabs their attention, and hopefully we'll start kind of using their attention in the right way to help them realize what space can do for everyone.
Well, we have just a couple minutes. If you guys want to use it, I'm going to duck out now to go back to the big room. I hope everybody sticks around for Frank White. Gitika, I think you recorded this yourself, right?
Yes, I did, and I'll upload it onto the Google Drive afterwards.
Awesome. Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you for the session. It was great to hang out in here as well and be part of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And it was nice reconnecting with you.
Thank you very much, Gitika. It was really good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. Yes, I'm looking forward to connecting with you as well, Elizabeth, afterwards. If you guys
Okay.
have any questions, last minute questions, I'd love to answer them. Or otherwise, feel free to always reach out to me on any of my social media platforms because I'll definitely respond. And it was wonderful meeting you, Nadia. I'm sure we're going to cross paths again. I'm pretty sure I've talked to you before somewhere on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we'll look back at it later. But it's wonderful meeting everyone.
And Mohtasham, you connect with Gitika, really, right? Mohtasham and I are connected on LinkedIn, so I hope you two connect as well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
so just I've connected with Gitika before. I don't know if you remember it or not. We had a session like a few months ago.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I have like really bad memory sometimes. But I'm really glad to be able to see you again. I'm sure I'll remember you for next time, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Have to look more forward to it.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see that you're really taking advantage of these free opportunities to get involved and learn more about space. And really, if you have any questions regarding anything, feel free to always reach out.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to reach out to you. So I was going to ask you about your journey. Like, what was your favorite part about your journey into space industry?
Yeah, so I mean, also it was nice to meet you, Kiara, as well. And you're asking my favorite part of the journey, right? My favorite part of the journey. I think I kind of was able to answer this in a previous question, which was, I being able to really just meet the different individuals and I was being accepted with open arms. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand that my favorite part of this journey has been able to meet my role models and other incredible students who are doing things that are unimaginably amazing. So for me to be able to, network and connect and build a supportive community has been the best part. Everyone is so supportive on social media. Honestly, I never expected that. I didn't think social media was such a great community to connect with people who had similar interests, apart from the people you might know near your home or someone who goes to the same school as you. So it was very nice that social media was a place for me to build a global network and to find a global community with people all over the world who share the same passions as I do and meet some of my closest friends. Some of two of my closest friends that I've probably met is through the space industry and through LinkedIn. And we met in person at a conference and we just hit it off. So I think sometimes really just, I think the people I've met 100% has been the best part of this journey.
Yeah, that's really true. And I love your answers. I mean, they are full of insightful information and full of inspired feedback.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I know you guys have a closing session in a few minutes. Yeah, I don't really think there are any other questions. And it was really wonderful meeting all of you today. And I hope you were able to take away something from this. And I hope to see you guys all in person at a future conference or future event, or maybe all in space together one day. Wouldn't that be amazing? So thank you so much for your time. And I hope we can stay connected. Bye.